Thanks for joining us on episode 3 of Zero Basis Points. Funny enough, I just came back from T3, so a lot to talk about today. So George, how have you been?
It's our 1-year anniversary.
I know. We met at T3. Although it was earlier in the year last year, it was in January, I think, end of January, but this time ended up being in February, March actually. Had us out in Dallas this time, and I was making jokes because it was storm season out there, I'm guessing. It was my first time in Dallas for a while. And I think Joel got everyone in the same place just to get rid of any WealthTech in the nation with one tornado.
Yeah, he's going to kill everybody. And then because he's got a new app he's going to release next week. So, yeah, you got to wipe everybody out. And then he's going to release the T3 app that covers performance and CRM and planning.
And then he's going to,
might have been a move.
He's got everyone signed up. He's going to go just release one app, all encompassing, and just be the industry leader. So yeah, I knew he knew what he was doing, but it's just, once I was there.
If you attended T3, you're automatically enrolled. Expect to see the next bill on your recurring statement. And no, I'm kidding. But that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, T3, it was, it stinks to not be there. So this was like, I've been going to T3 since like, I don't know, a really long time, I'll say. And yeah, this was just one I had to miss. And, there's so many friends that like I see in these pictures where I'm like, oh man, and at the same time, it's been like just a busy week at iPipeline and in my household, So you were you were on the floor at T3. Anything like what big, I mean, we're right there. So we're jumping right into maybe the first T3 retrospective. But, coming right off of it, like what's kind of like sticking out for real?
So I think, last year we did a kiosk. So you were with us at the kiosk. And this year we did an exhibit floor booth at the Event Village, which is something that, you can be, you're the author of that entire experience or before you.
I helped, yeah.
So it was awesome. It was great. It was good to be on the exhibit floor this time. The only one criticism of kind of how it was set up at this location specifically, it was on 2 floors. So you had the kiosks upstairs with some of the larger meeting rooms, and then you had the exhibit kind of booths and everything downstairs. And if you remember Las Vegas last year, it was essentially on the same floor. So people would walk out of the session, they'd come through the kiosk, there was more opportunities to talk. But to be honest, for us specifically for ARCA, it was a night and day difference. Last year when we had launched and kind of came out of stealth at that time, a lot of people just didn't know about AI. And I mentioned this on the last podcast, but it's such a new concept to folks and what we were doing. This time, you had so many people coming by the booth asking about, how does this work with my data lake? What can I do here? If I'm sitting in the system, can you guys do this? So there was so much more questions coming through. We were busy for all of the days that we were in the booth, which was awesome. I mean, that's what you want from these things. Right. But as you know, it's kind of like the interesting stuff of setting up the booths last minute always happens.
Nobody will ever talk about conference anxiety, right? It's exactly. How about the days leading up to the flight where I feel nauseous, the 500 check boxes that aren't checked, and like the 10 things I forgot. And yeah, so, and on top of the fact, like nobody really wants to leave their house. Like when it comes to like, especially after going through the pandemic, like, I had to get back out there on the road really quickly, but I totally understand like those first couple conferences and even every conference, like, man, I don't want to do this. But then you're there and it's cool and you see guys like you and friends and it's like, you get pumped up on the industry and you get back to work. So it's
exactly fun. So I think that was cool. A lot of it was just seeing the same people. And now that we've been around for a year and having gone to other conferences, you're seeing people, folks from Conquest Planning keep coming by. You're saying hello. You see other people that you haven't seen. You're seeing people move to other places, other companies as well. So it's always a nice kind of family reunion, as I say. But, aside from that, it's the usual. They kind of had everything. They had the sessions. What was funny is last year, I think we had 1 or 2 sessions about AI. Obviously, it was mentioned through some of the panels, but primary sessions were around 1 or 2. This time, I think 17 out of 22 sessions were like around AI in the first day. So everyone's talking about it. So it's just a matter of who has an actual product and who's built something with it. And that's where, a lot of people who I would ask for their opinion of what they thought around T3, what they were thinking about the booths that they would walk around. And it was like, a lot of these are just kind of, vaporware around like things that can be done, etc. But realistically, like there's one or two companies that are doing that and we're seeing it. So, obviously those companies grab a lot of attention, but
right.
That forum's changing. It was much smaller than the Vegas one. I'll say that I think because it was 20th anniversary last year, so
Right. Yeah.
there's more folks out there, and it's easier to go to Vegas than Dallas.
100%. I mean, Vegas, it's the desert, so you get the benefits of spreading out. You bring it into a metro, and you're going to be on 2 floors because you got to start going vertical. It's just the reality of cramming everybody into a city. So Joel, like, I know you can't do Vegas every year, but
Once in a while.
It's nice. It's nice to spread out like that. What else did we say? Denver would be cool. Were we talking about Denver? That would be fun.
We had Joel's ear at one year, and we were just giving him ideas of different cities, and we just do a bunch out there. Like,
right? Yeah, he wasn't listening. He's not listening to our suggestions at all. Not mine for sure. Yeah, it's tough to compare to Vegas. I mean, it's the 20-year anniversary, and maybe people were like, "This is the one we got to be at because it's the 20th year." So that was the best one I've been to, which is what I say about every single T3 I've ever gone to. So really, man, of all the conferences, it's one of the ones you have to go to. So it's starting to unfold in my mind where I'm like, okay, so we've you've got T3, Edge / Informa / ETF, that conference has like 5 different names, but I'll just call them Edge, wealthmanagement.com, free plugs here, but that one within Future Proof, Schwab, that seems like, the main wealth management ones. I don't know, did I miss one that you're thinking of where you're like, no, dude, you got to go to that one too? I mean, there's Market Council. I think that's pretty high. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
I think you got to go to that one. And
that one's in the fall too. It's the best month. I mean, that's good.
And you got to do it in a different way. I think it's very different than the other ones, right? So, and that's what they pride themselves on. It's kind of like, hey, we are so much more intimate. There's leaders, decision makers of these firms that are here. So we want you to essentially come in, get introduced, talk to people. It's less of booths and kiosks and demoing, more of I want to talk to folks. And that's what I realized. That was my first market council last year when I went, but I was able to, speak to some of the more influential folks in the space, get introduced to even Sarah Baker from Triad, which was awesome. That was our first interaction. But, it's like you sit around, you have lunch, you talk to people, and if someone's like, hey, I like what you're saying, let's talk more. So I think that's the type of forum and what they pride themselves on versus other different conferences. But I think you need to have a little mix of each. I don't think you get away by just saying we're going to do kiosks and booths like all throughout the year. I think you just run out of stuff to showcase. And then you're left with, large enterprises like Microsoft coming into it and just pitching their stuff at some point.
I know. Come on now. It'll be fun to pick on Microsoft because none of our friends are there.
Yeah.
And if they were, I would just call them sellouts. So it's okay. It's not people in our not friends in our space who are staying up all night to build solutions.
Yeah.
The acceleration though, back to what you were saying with AI, like a little bit last year, more this year. Like, it's just going to be so exponential that like even like when you're just digging into it all the time, and you and I love to talk about it. It's what you do, so I kind of lean into you because that's your domain. But it's really obvious. Go back to just beating up on LinkedIn. Not so obvious if you're there. If you're on X, it's very obvious that you better get tuned into AI like fast. And so it's even if you're not into it, you're just going to notice like an acceleration every year. So obviously, man. So it's great that you're there. You're there at the perfect time. And unfortunately, we couldn't be there. So I'm going to convince like iPipeline next year, like we've got to be at a minimum. Like I didn't have enough time to present my case. T3, like every year, you're like, oh man, God, the thing's coming right up in a couple of weeks. Like I'm screwed. Like, especially if you're going, because then you're like, oh, I don't have anything prepared. But yeah, it's I got to get us there next year because we have, we continue to implement like huge like AOE solutions for broker dealers that we've been solving on. And like as I work through some of these implementations, I'm just like, I didn't know that there were so many problems in this space, and I didn't know how like massively we solve for them. And on the wealth management side, I might have said it to you previously, like we're always wishing we like could populate data as we move through a workflow. And that's what we do on some of the like annuity and insurance, like AOE kind of stuff, like I was saying before. So yeah, like a lot of hot action there on the broker dealer side. A lot of really cool like laser app and alpha trust onboarding stories. I don't want to get this into a product demo, but I want to be there next year. Like, you know, I'd love to even be like on stage talking about some of our solutions. So I'll make a case for getting back there. So tell me more about Microsoft though.
So what's funny is
like you were there. I read, so I'm going to tell you what
Yeah.
I think, but I'd love to know you're kind of there and they're like there.
Yeah, so I think it feeds into a lot of what, you know, we've called in this environment as, you know, some of these larger institutions trying to look into the space, trying to figure out and pushing for that revolutionary kind of AI step in wealth management and wealth tech. But what's funny is, I think what summarizes it best is we had something that was shared or kind of posted by Craig on LinkedIn, Craig Iskowitz. Let me see if I...
Right.
Let me share the map and we can kind of explain through it.
And Craig, all the respect to Craig, that guy. I listened like his last podcast is like 290. I'm like, my goodness.
So this is what was initially posted. This is what was shared by Microsoft around how kind of the revolutionary the space is going to be with Copilot, right? How do you enable an ecosystem with AI? And I believe Amy Young, who did a great job, obviously, but just coming through and kind of presenting her case for what Microsoft is trying to do for the space. But this is the map they put out. And I couldn't help but have to comment on, like, look, if we're reliant on wealth tech touching up on all this stuff, we're in for a very rude awakening, because it's not as much around these things that you want to automate, really. It's more so around fragmented data in the space. And some of these things in the map, sure, it looks very busy, but realistically, how much value is it adding by being able to, you know, chart over your expertise to your contacts? I don't think anyone's done that before.
Yeah, I think they're trying to make like CRM look as complicated as possible, because look starting at the bottom by that Adobe symbol. Like I log in and I look for contacts, which are people right above that. Sometimes they're part of a group. When I load the contacts, sometimes they have a meeting or a task associated with them, which is a message. And maybe there's a document associated with that. Calendar events. I mean, do I even need to bring them up? They're, you know, the easiest thing to consume. Email, PST file, collaboration, whatever. Expertise, me, insights. Okay. And then coworkers. It's like, yeah, this is a CRM. And then you have 5 integration partners. Like, all right, great start, guys. Do you know what a household is? Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. You know,
that's the big difference for me. It's like purpose-built tech versus having to start. If you are giving me the scaffolding for something and you're saying build it, how many firms are actually going to be able to pick it up and start doing it? And 2, you kind of have to be in a Microsoft Office firm already to be able to leverage a lot of this, right? So one takeaway I will give across this entire thing with Copilot is like the Teams AI thing. That hits note takers hard. And if they're getting into it like you want to compete with Microsoft, that's another point that we can kind of get back to, because there was some news around that. But realistically, everything else, like you said, it's CRM. It's just information that's sitting there. Or better yet, if you want to be so custom, you have the technical resources to do it. You're just going to do a data lake. You're going to feed in from all these guys into one repository. And from there, you can build your AI. From there, you can do all the functions. You got to think about the intake of that as well. So how do you reconcile custodial data feeds, things like that? That's not really something that Microsoft can do. That's not something that Copilot's going to do. So I think that there's a lot of hope and a little more, I would say, high level view into the wealth tech space. But once you actually peel back the layers of the onion, you're going to get into your first data issue, which we talked about in the first episode. It's the stuff that you don't know until it like shit hits the fan. That's going to start happening all across this. And the more they're tied to each other, guess what? You're going to have dependencies from one data set to another, and the one's going to break and essentially just take the automation or workflow completely out of scope. So I think that's where a lot of criticism is due. However, it's like I said, I appreciate what Amy's doing, Craig's doing, bringing it to light. I think there's ways that you can kind of skin the cat, multiple ways to do it. this could be one of them if you're one of those firms, but I think it's working backwards versus leveraging AI to move forward. But
This looks like Microsoft Dynamics reversing into the slide without saying Microsoft Dynamics.
correct.
Because I'll tell you what this is in front of us from a technical perspective. Anybody like, oh man, no, you need Microsoft to put this together. This workflow, aside from the big logos, I can't do what Morningstar, Fidelity, eMoney, SCI, or Adobe does. All right, let's leave that out of it. But all the blue stuff, it's a CRM bucket. Inside of the CRM bucket, you're going to have an email bucket. Inside of the email bucket, you're also going to have a documents bucket. So you've got, looks like CRM demographic, and you also have notes about everything you've ever done. You have tasks for everything that you're going to do. You have all of the email correspondence, which falls into a PST file, which you can do whenever you want from your Microsoft account. And the documents, which you can manage and crush with Core Script. I was watching what you were talking about with Core Script. So anyway, I'll let Haik talk about Core Script more, but your ability to read documents and then to give you insight and actionable insight. Man, I don't want to read this document and like decide what I should do next. Can you tell me what to do and read the document for me? But yeah, it's like I would have made this chart you should just feed this chart to like ChatGPT and ask it to simplify it, and then you'll probably get like 4 buckets. So,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah. But so yeah, when I saw this, I was like, this is nothing new. I mean, I was doing this in 2010 with Grendel. Redtail's been doing this the whole time. There's no way WealthBox isn't doing this. And on top of that, it's solvable with a data lake because everything that the buckets that I kind of jumbled around them. Within the CRM, you've got the CRM data that lives natively in the CRM. You've got the email data that probably lives outside of it in some archive that the CRM is calling. Same goes for the documents. So you have those 3 buckets that we need to feed into a data lake or somehow bring upstream into the AI tool so that it can communicate with the CRM. I don't see anything. Yeah, I look at that chart. I'm like, show me something new. I mean, you came to T3 for that. That's what you put together for T3. You're Microsoft.
Yeah.
Isn't it fun to pick on Microsoft? Like, it's not like I'm making fun of, you know what I mean? It's not a little company, It's like, come on.
I think you said, what did you say? If you don't want to hurt your friends' feelings, you just build on Microsoft.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, build on Salesforce, you know what I mean? But.
Yeah, no, yeah, well, speaking of CRMs though, George, I mean, that was a question I was getting pretty often at the conference as well, right? So it was around, there's a couple of CRMs that were there. Everything centers around for advisors on that business. And you've been in that space for so long. I always say, it's funny when I describe you to some folks in the WealthTech space, and a lot of people actually heard about 0 basis points already at the conference. And they're like, oh, I thought that was just a one-off you guys were doing. And I'm like, no, it's going to be a real podcast because I said, George is like, and I resonate with this. I said, he's like Rick Rubin. He knows what he likes and what he doesn't when he's listening to music, right, Rick? You know what you like and what you don't, and what the market essentially kind of follows that same kind of thought process with these softwares out there. So I think CRM is one of the bread and butter businesses for you where you're like, I really know what it takes. So speaking of that, I was getting people to come in and say, hey, I know you guys do your AI stuff, but I'm looking for a CRM solution as well. They always cross-reference with vendors and ask, who should I talk to? Who else? What's the best ones out there now? And my go-to are, I'll kind of go through the list after you kind of talk a little bit about it because of my experiences, and they haven't been a little limited, but at least I know kind of what people are using. But I kind of give them the top ones. There's big firms that use Salesforce. Sometimes it's overkill to use Salesforce. Some other firms will use WealthBox, and it's like, well, now I'm going to get onboarded there and I got to move stuff over. What does that look like? So, I think you can essentially weigh in on a lot of your experience to talk about that. So what do you think when you get that question? What's the best CRM? What do you say?
A lot of it's going to go down to like me asking a couple questions about the firm, but I just want to say when I rely on when I look back across the last 20 years, I have a lot of data that I recall and things that I just know I'm certain, and that's kind of like that's my path into like the data of history. And then I've got the intuition that I always relied on, like 2 very different inbound sets of data feeding your intuition, which some reason you just kind of know something. It's not necessarily data driven, maybe, but so that, and I heard this on a recent podcast. I don't want to get too far down it, but my gut check is to say just use WealthBox. Like, it's the most affordable solution. Oh, well, we want to be hey, we're at 50 million now. We're going to be at 150 by the end of the year, and we're going to merge with 3 advisors next year, so we're going to be at $500 million, and we're going to move to like, dude, just get WealthBox. Like, enough. And if you're going to scale, get more WealthBox seats. Like, if you look at everything that they're doing, it's obviously the most innovative solution. Now, you can also get Salesforce and become a Salesforce committed shop, and that's what you're going to be. And the bigger the outlay for CRM, the more screwed you're going to be when you decide that's not the tool that you want to be. When you want to leave your CRM, it's not as hard as everybody thinks. You ask your current CRM provider for a backup as of whenever they can run it. And then you just keep using the CRM, and you give that backup to the new provider, and you tell them to run a data conversion routine so that you can do a proof of concept. Like, we got to know the data is going to be there. You look at your most robust client from the original CRM. You make sure that robust client matched up to the new CRM. And then when you decide that you want to do a final CRM data conversion, you just decide a cutoff point. Okay, on April 2nd, we'll keep going. We'll keep skipping April Fool's Day. On April 2nd, we're going to do a cutover to the new CRM. We're going to request a new backup on April 1st. It's going to get converted overnight, and we start taking notes in it the next day. Now, taking notes in it the next day, that just rolls off my tongue. So going into where maybe AI was talking at T3 is people talk about the importance of note taking. Okay, in our business in wealth management, your notes protect you from everything, and you need to write them real fast. That's why you need to be able to take them with a mobile app. Like, talk to the client, they refuse the long-term care based on the recommendation, and this is why, or whatever. You just have to have everything notated, non-alterable, non-deletable. It was there. If you need to amend it, write a note about the note. Okay, stop overthinking of it. Stop trying to alter a note. Don't be stupid. And my new employees, hey, in this firm, we write a note about every interaction we have. If you don't write a note, I'm going to give you a warning, and I'm going to write it down. And if you don't do it a second time, I'm going to fire you. And that's how you make sure your notes are accurate. So I was talking with a couple, I talk with firms all the time, but one in particular, when we talk about kind of enforcing rules, it's like, well, I'm going to warn you once and twice. Sure, I'll warn you twice, and then we'll fire you the third time. So it's going to be, so anyway, that's how I would manage CRM, and kind of the most important thing is note taking. Everything else should be automatic. My contacts are in there. Emails are automatically linked. Documents are obviously associated with them. They don't have to be. It's not a big deal if they aren't, but it sure is nice. And then the account data is nice to have there as well. So, I'm not a WealthBox user, but I have a WealthBox login because I have to. I'm an integration partner, and I use the tool, and I never had to get trained. I know how to use it. I can, navigate around, and some people will even call me and just catch me on the phone, and they're trying to do something and figure it out. And I'm like, I can kind of, I'm like, look in the upper right-hand corner. Aren't there 3 little lines or something? Oh yeah, it's up there. Oh yeah, it's under applications. Oh, I see it. So it's intuitive even without looking at it. So, not trying to do a WealthBox commercial today either, but that's the one I would use. Just, it's affordable.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting what you're saying, though, because a lot of people have the fear. The fear primarily comes from the conversion, right? It's not about what should I use today and how should I essentially do this thing for, the next couple of years. It's more of like, is this going to grow with me? And if you're going to go towards and become this enterprise kind of an RIA at some point, and you're going to need Salesforce because it has all these other things, and you're going to buy Financial Force with it, and you're going to do all this stuff. Well, guess what? The biggest fear of conversion, it's not that big of a deal to actually convert your data over. It's not easy based on the resource constraints and things like that internally, but it's not a blocker. And especially coming from doing conversions for like full-on transactional data, tax law data into ADAPAR, out-of-performance systems, things like that, the CRM is not as tough. It's mostly around over time, what does it look like? What are you bringing in? The notes, kind of having that POC in parallel. For any firm that's worth, their weight, they'd be able to do that and prove it out. For the ones that can't, sure, they want to get you through and kind of pull the wool over your eyes, get you signed up, and then, there's a lot of those too, but that's what you got to avoid. That's why I think, my go-to has been WealthBox as well for folks. And then I say, look, if you're a firm that's thinking you need the amount of firepower that Salesforce has, you're going to need to then support it with the management and the power users behind it. How many people do I know that, they went down the Salesforce route and are like, well, there's so many fields now, we're not even using a lot of them. But guess what? You're not paying a cheaper price for that. You're still paying for what you're,
Right.
got initially. It's just you're using less of the functionality that existed before, and that's on you, right? So I think where it's a little more purpose-built to grow with the firm, something like WealthBox is awesome. What are your thoughts on Redtail? I mean, I know that's a thing with like Orion and a lot of those firms using it, but just generally because you were in that space,
Yeah, I mean, they got to the point where they're they're right there with WealthBox. Like they're big. They're bigger than WealthBox because they got bought by Orion. And if they hadn't gotten bought by Orion, I might be like, yeah, I'm really torn between Redtail and WealthBox. I 100% would be saying that if they weren't bought by Orion. Since they've been bought by Orion, there has been a migration away from Redtail. I would say, my intuition speaking here, that there has been more of a migration away from Orion than a migration to Orion, because it's like, oh man, now I can get CRM right there next to my performance, which is like I sold that when I was selling CRM too. So it's like you're convinced that that's the best solution. Then you see Orion buying Redtail, and maybe they'll watch it, maybe not. But I'd love to know, am I right? Like, were the inflows greater than the outflows? I think that there were more. I mean, Advison seems, from my intuition and just looking from outside, to be getting a lot of assets and CRM users, and I don't think WealthBox is losing them. So who's bleeding? Like I said, it's Redtail's blood in the water. Red. I mean, how ironic, huh?
Well,
after all those years,
yeah.
Redtail. Yeah, it's because the tail got cut off.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a good one. I think the other part of it that you just mentioned for the notes side. So I talk about the notes taking apps so much and the AI note taking apps, and there's so many of them. And I remember at one point I was at FinTech Alley at Future Proof last year in Huntington Beach, and there was like 6 other ones there, and the same ones, a couple of the same ones were there at T3, not all of them. So they're kind of picking and choosing where they're making the best ROI, I'm guessing. But you have the 2 or 3 essentially leaders in that space where it's like Jump, Zox, and then Zeppelin AI. And then there's a couple more that pop up, right? It's one of the ones where, it's very quick to get to that. And now you have, I believe the reason I bring up Zox is because they did have a $13.8 million, I think, funding, or a Series A that they announced at T3, which congrats to them. And I think Jump had a 20 million one a month or so earlier. So congrats.
And
to both.
Jump just got Osaic, right?
Well, they got both.
Didn't I read that? I read.
They got
both. I read
both.
this week. Really? Okay.
Yes. So that's the funny thing. One thing I called out way back when these were happening, a lot of folks would come to us and say, well, at Arco, are you going to do, notes as well for like meetings and meetings AI, et cetera? And I said, look, I think it's kind of a race to the bottom, right? It's a feature, not a product. There are product things you can build around that feature as well, so you can kind of separate yourself. And I think Zeppelin's doing a little bit of that, Zox as well. I don't have too much insight into Jump for that specific kind of vertical.
Yeah,
but
I don't know a lot about these tools either.
Yeah, so I know they're kind of going through that route, but it's going to be a race towards the bottom. And a lot of the firms, just because you have the connection with Osaic, LPL, whoever, the advisor's still going to make the decision to purchase or not and buy or not, right? So you get an access, you get approved for it. However, the advisor at the end of the day is going to do it. How many people are actually going to do it, and how useful do they find? I hear mixed things around, hey, the quality's not great here. Hey, I'm just not keeping up with it. But some people do like it. Some people do use it. But I think it boils down to what you described in the last podcast and just a minute ago. You could, I don't know if the whole meeting needs to be transcribed. And I don't know if there's a benefit to it. Because if you've ever sat in an advisor meeting with your client, there's a lot of things that are said that don't really have much weight as far as workflows. But then there are things that are said that are like, I know what to do. I may have forget it, so let me just record it on that mobile app, get a note, or get the robot overnight to come put the,
right.
post it on my
yellow
forehead.
Sticky there, yeah.
Yeah, and now I'm all set. But I mean, what are your thoughts around there? Are you getting asked this stuff in your meetings? Are they kind of looking at the meeting notes and AI and saying like, this is somewhere that we're looking at going?
From an AI perspective, I think is underlying every request that I get. But can I put a note there is a part of like almost every implementation that I've ever done, even on the, I'm so fresh to the insurance side that I shouldn't speak to like a lot of use cases, but as cases move through the pipeline, the it would be cool to add a note here or there because I decided to do that at that point. So I think people like to put notes where they want to put them. And it's wherever I am at that specific point, I'd like to write a note. I'd like that to be captured. I'd like it to be non-alterable, non-deletable, recallable, and part of kind of maybe AI supervision, or well, part of supervision, period. But AI enabled. I don't know. So it's, I've always been a note taker, selling it from a CRM perspective, but now I still get it, but where it's like, can a note be a part of that? Like, can I put a note there? And does it get preserved? And, so that never stopped getting those questions. So, but from an AI perspective and conversations with clients, I don't use them. I'm more engaged, and I take a different approach to conversation where I like to just listen. And I know that AI can listen better than me, but my intuition tells me that the other side of the table feels most comfortable when they've got my attention, because that's why they're paying me, not a robot, to give them advice. So I think I have the mental capacity to just, at least for a couple more years, to just capture the highlights of a meeting, and then maybe a good thing to do would be to ask the AI, like, what do you think? So it's that's my thought right now, at least about it.
I think there's something to be said about, Teams AI, right? Zoom AI, all these Gong, Fathom, like all these other systems exist that are doing generic kind of meeting notes and AI listeners into the notes. And I was on a call earlier today on Zoom, and the note taker was there before the other person, already starting to record and transcribe, and then send you a little email at the end of, here's a summary of everything, right? And some of these do really good. But the use case is so generic that I really question, like, is there a purpose-built financial AI listener that really, because what's being said in the meeting?
I love what you're saying. I love what you're going.
Yeah, exactly. I'm speaking to you and I'm saying, hey, I want to open an account and do this stuff. Like, if there isn't really anything from there that you're going to take from the AI enableness side, right? And there's workflow and automation and things like that we can talk about. But if you're just listing on it, then really it's such a generic use case that you're starting to compete with Microsoft. You're starting to compete with Zoom. You're starting to compete with some of these bigger players in the space that can easily come into the market. And if you're a firm, and if you're a firm that's using one of them, you're just going to stick to that enterprise like Teams.
Great. And something that you got me thinking, and I'm like, I try not to talk over you. I try to never do that, but I do it too much. But as like we try to, and I'm one of them, and I'm unfolding this, unpacking, as we say, idea live. But like we focus on getting our notes so right, and then you'll write, like, you'll have scratch pads in your desks, a mess of notes. And you're like, oh man, that's a good little tidbit, and go into your CRM and you add that note and you do all these things. And you spend a lot of time and energy into getting the notes just right? But when you get into the reality of growing a business and moving things forward in life, it's like, well, if it was that important, man, it wouldn't be a note. It would be a part of something you have to do, which is a task. Like a note is a rear view mirror item, man. So it's like, just had a call with this firm, and they need what we sell, and this is the next step. And to get the next step done, this is what we need to do internally, and this is what they need to do. Let's get a nice little recap out and drive this thing forward. So, notes are critical. We need to be taking them, especially when it comes to like investment recommendations, like why we're doing things with clients, because they might come back and challenge that advice, or in the event of an audit, it's like you're defending yourself. Like, why did you make that recommendation? It's like, oh man. And on top of that, if you're working on a team, Like, how about you load a contact and there's no notes? You're like, I thought you said you talked to this guy. Like, you didn't write notes. Like, so yeah, notes are important and critical to take, but at the same time, we put so much emphasis on getting them right when it's really, and the AI critics of what I'm saying here is going to say, well, the AI is only going to take out and put it into an actionable item. And it's like, well, I don't know. I feel like we're doing a little bit of reverse hustling. I worked with these managements when I lived in LA, and I was working with those guys in Glendale. But the engineers, they used to have to do things with the forklift. They said, George, this is reverse hustling. And there's a little bit of reverse, and I was an operations guy. So I would say, it's all that note taking is a little bit of reverse hustling when you're trying to push something forward. I mean, and dude, we're doing this podcast and everything we do every day to push it forward. How about you get to the end of a week where you didn't push anything forward? You're like, this sucked. This week was absolutely unproductive. So, and you know what, man, the vibe across the industry is there's been a lot of that this year. It's just been so choppy. Market is swinging, everything's swinging, kids, but it's life is moving really fast, and we need to focus on what we need to do next to drive whatever we want to do forward, and overemphasizing note taking outside of protecting yourself from future litigation. I think it's overkill.
Yeah. It's funny.
Does that make sense that I just rambled too much? Like, was I?
No, that makes total sense. I mean, that's how you feel, though. I think that's the unfiltered version of the stuff we need to talk about that people don't get to, because some of these companies who are in the space, like one critique I heard about a lot of it, I like to show ARCA as much as I possibly can. So when I was up there on the keynote presentation or kind of keynote speech with Oleg, I only had slides. They wanted to kind of be mindful of people's times. I had a whole video, 3-minute video. I was going to show them the discovery, the quick insights, the workflows, automation, domain knowledge, all these things. And I had that video running down at the booth because anyone who would come up, I was like, here you go. Here's what it looks like. And here's what it can look like for you, etc. And then I had to do a sped up version for the next kind of thing with everyone else up there. But I think there has to be kind of a critique for these teams or who are working in the AI note-taking space. Someone said they were up there, one of them, they didn't get to see anything. And they were like, I was kind of disappointed because it was about, hey, we're really good. Then they had a couple slides about what people are saying about us that make us good. They had a video of, they themselves calling themselves good. And then it was kind of like, that's it. So buy us. And essentially, they were like, I wanted to see it in action. And I had I heard that same kind of thing at Impact, where people were like, not a lot of folks are demoing stuff here. And I get it. It's tough sometimes. Live demos are tough. But I had folks come up to us, 2 folks that came up to us from other vendors, and they said, hey, I see the video. I like it. Does this work today? And I opened the laptop and I was like, look at it. And one of them was Brian from Orion, from Redtail. And
right,
he was
Ryan
like,
from Redtail. Come on, man.
Yeah, Ryan from Redtail.
Yeah.
And he was like, can I see it in action? I was like, yeah. Opened it up and I was connected to the Wi-Fi and showed him. And he was like, wow, okay. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on. A lot of people are talking a lot of hype around what they're doing, not showing it as much in the space.
Yeah,
but
you can't get up there on stage anymore and be like, yo, our product, and you got like somebody wakeboarding on a big screen in the background, and like a drone going around the company headquarters. You're like, who cares, man?
Yeah.
Like, you got 2 minutes of my attention because my coffee's almost gone and it's gross, and I need to get a cup of water. So just tell me how this is going to make me more money real fast.
Yeah.
And you've got to, and like, the technical question is this production? Like, can I get a login for this pretty soon and log in and use it for my business? Like, can I log in and search for a client? Like, I can type their last name and hit enter or something, and then they show up and all this cool stuff is there. So yeah, you're right. People have had it, going and looking at, like just like these demos that aren't product specific or just the product itself. Man, like, that just made me think is one of the coolest demos that was shared with me through some friends. But the Salesforce did an incredible AI demo at their last, like, what's the Salesforce annual conference, whatever.
Whatever
it is.
Yeah.
But they had like Neiman Marcus or somebody. Customer support is a Salesforce client. So like somebody called in and needed customer support, and the AI tool, let's just say it was Susie, I don't remember the name. Susie talks back and gives support, and support can only go so far. So then they ended the call. The guy said, let's hook up like an API that has the AI tool look elsewhere for inventory. So that same customer support call, guy calls back in the Neiman Marcus. Customer service person says, yeah, we're out of that shirt. And he said, do you have them in any other locations? Beep, 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 beep. Yep, we got a large. What size would you like? We're going to mail that out. And this was a live demo. This is production. So you're like, man. And I feel like for me, that was the demo of 2024. I'm like,
Yeah.
Better be in production.
That was Dreamforce or Agent
Right.
Force. Yeah,
Dreamforce, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Like when you can actually show them what you're talking about and just not talk about it. There is something they can touch, they can see happen. I think that's such a strong thing to do. And there's all these, I would say, gatekeeping around a lot of these like demos. Like one thing that Future Proof is doing, they do like a demo drop and they let you go up on stage and do the demo and whatever. I'm like, just come down to the kiosk and see it and ask me the questions. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to show you some stuff. You're going to have a bunch of questions about how it works. When you're sitting in an audience of 300, great, I can show all you guys all these things that are happening. But I really want you down at the booth to ask me exactly what your concern is, because I'm going to then map out how it's going to work for you. And if you're going to be all hands on deck with it, we're going to be partners. We're going to do it. We're going to make it work, and it's going to be successful. But if you're just going to see it and say, I saw it, looks great, I want to buy it, I don't think that's really going to resonate. And at some point, you're going to be like, well, I'm kind of reluctant. I did buy it so soon. I should have maybe, tested it out a bit more. Yeah. But that's a whole
that's why Market Council's like a really good conference, because you're not doing that many demos, right? It's just like,
right.
We're at T3, advisors, I'll just say it to you if you're listening, man, when you walk up to us at a conference and say, what do you got? It's like, dude, just keep going. Like, maybe I'll just wear a t-shirt at conferences that says, what sucks for your firm? And you come up and you just start talking to me. Because it's if you're just perusing the conference floor and wondering, like, it takes so much energy, and you've done this 500 times, and then somebody comes up and says, just do it one more time. And you already know, based on that strong intuition signal, this guy's not buying this thing. And what's up with the trials being like, not, trials or deployment times, like, has the architecture gotten like too heavy? Like when I wanted to give out a trial of Grendel, the CRM, but this is only, we did this from like 2008 till 2019. If somebody wanted a trial, man, I would have that thing out in less than a minute. And they'd be like, well, how long does it take to deploy? I'm like, when can you pay me? So it's, what are your thoughts on that? And why maybe we're watching videos of people on boats instead of, front end demos in production,
I think that's such a good call out, because I think as technology is getting better, the trials, setting up environments, instances, and all that should be quicker, depending with the caveat of what you are trialing, right? So if you're going to say
100%, yeah, performance.
Exactly. If I'm going to do performance with all history and I want it for a year or whatever, there's a whole conversion aspect to that. That's just not going to, the environment might be up, but the data in there's not going to be, right? So there's that. There's some,
I think that's understood,
Yeah. And there's some cogs around getting access to stuff. So if you're going to go sign the LOAs for the custodians to get data in there to even see today's data, give it a week, right? The LOA process takes a while, DocuSign and whatnot. They turn it on. Schwab's actually pretty quick. But if you're talking about this other stuff that, hey, it's going to take us a couple months till you see value, or you at least see data in there, I think that's total bullshit. And I think that's more of a sales thing than anything else. That's not from the product side, because the advisor and user wants to see if they're going to see the value as soon as possible, wants to see if there's utility for it. And you could even give them something that's not fully there and say, look, it's already kind of getting into that space where you will start seeing what you want out of it. And I think you can kind of build very close ties and connection by just being transparent with those folks around. Right. But if you're kind of holding it back and gatekeeping it and saying, well, give us more, and your goal is that you'll have them load up and already invest so much time into it that they're reluctant to move away from it, even if it doesn't work, because you've had so much time just kind of eating their brain then I think that's a horrible sales cycle. And I think that's
Right.
what we should stay away from. But that's
Right.
what most are doing.
Yeah. On the I understand it on because I participate in them on the massive implementations where the business rules are just insane across the organization and it just takes time to consume and configure. Like there's no way to speed it up. That's a win for humans. So we need humans and people to configure and run huge deployments. But otherwise, yeah, like I'm like, how quickly will, from a fintech perspective, you better be ready for advisors and everybody in that orbit to ask you how quickly are we going to see value on this.
Correct.
And man, another thing I'll say, on LinkedIn, it's the worst app. I'll just say that, dude. And how about this? We called out the bug that I confirmed with you. When you go to thumbs up or heart something, you got to do that twice. It's like, enough. And on top of that, there's all these AI posts and AI response. There's all this stuff happening that I didn't know was happening, and I'm like, am I on here with robots?
Pretty much.
That's a shame. But what was I going to say about
LinkedIn?
Yeah, at LinkedIn. Adoption. So people are like, yeah, these tools. Some guy had a post up about CRM stinks, and then like if you scroll down, then it was like if it's not implemented correctly, it's like, yeah, man, well, obviously, like what? Why did I comment on that article? Why did I? But it was because I'm like, I understand if you're trying to be cute, but don't be cute.
Well, speaking of LinkedIn though, just general social media. We want to hear the funniest story. So I go into the conference, and Pete was talking to somebody, and I come out of my keynote speech, and I'm shaking hands with some folks and connecting, and we had like the Norima guys and everyone else, so it was great to just touch base with all of them. And this guy's talking about a problem he has, and he's like, I'm with someone right now, but I don't want to kind of use them anymore. I want to see what you guys have, and I think they're based on what you talked about on stage. There's real potential there. Like, what can we do to work together? This guy was someone that we were going back and forth and having like a Twitter, like an X, no longer Twitter, X battle with, around like me dropping videos of what we were doing and saying like, hey, here's the solution, here's how it works. And he was totally like dismissive of it on Twitter, on X. And, this was what, 2-3 months ago or something? I had to go back, and his face looks so familiar. So I go back into my replies and I'm checking. I'm like, I know I've talked to this guy, maybe not at a conference before, but even like maybe it was LinkedIn. So I go to the socials and I find it, and he was like, wow, so dismissive about AI and how it's going to help them. But now he's all for it. He's like, oh, we're trying to push for it and get it and this, that. And I'm like, how funny that these things, like even on social media, you'll be beefing with people about this and getting them to be keyboard warriors. And then suddenly in person, it's like, yeah, I might try it out. And it's like, did you change, or are you just kind of doing it for fun on social media?
Yeah, you better get on social media and admit, and kind of walk back this and like transparently.
Yeah, but it's so funny.
The difference, LinkedIn and X. Read a guy that I guess I follow on LinkedIn, respect what he says, was talking about the benefits of, if you understand your pond. And on a previous episode, I talked about X as an ocean. Well, it's like it's an ocean compared to the pond that LinkedIn is, but it's talking about the security of understanding your pond and your niche. And I'm like, dude, your niche, your comfort zone is your enemy in life. And like, maybe the thing that keeps me feeling like 23 inside and young and wily is like, I wish I was a comfort zone guy. Like, why couldn't I just like get a job at Vanguard and like get my clothes at the mall or wherever, It's just like, but instead I've got to like try to be just out of my comfort zone, move to California, the biggest pond you are on earth, in like here to push your boundaries as far as possible, and you're going to just try to be cozy and nice in a pond. And I appreciate that, and I understand how that might help you, but I'm like in a growth to the ends of infinity mode until like the spirit inside of me to do so dies. But it's really kind of never been, I feel like I'm on an upward trajectory there. But so, get out of your LinkedIn comfort zone and go to X and look at how the most successful people are being successful. Like it's just like you get in, you're on a hamster wheel in LinkedIn. Like you're not going to come out of there like
It's an echo
Damn.
chamber. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe X, maybe somebody could argue that X is, but you'll be on X and you'll bookmark something. You're like, dude, that's a changer right there. Which is funny because I said to my wife, I'm like, realistically, I feel like I should be exhausting my bookmarks first because I bookmark them because they're so important. But then you're like, no, I got to get like the and you just like keep going and you bookmark. So I'm like, how do I be the best most efficient X user? Go through my bookmarks. Yeah, all these tools, but X is such a more boundless tool where you're going to be exposed to, like, the CEOs of big organizations are talking openly and you can interact with them, and you
Yeah.
can't do that on LinkedIn, and the CEOs are not like interacting there. And
Yeah.
so you pay to verify your account, and people might like laugh at you about that checkbox, but that's what gets you closer to the person that you want to talk to at the top of the algorithm. So
Yeah. Because a lot of them have that blocker of you need to be verified to even respond, just to get rid of bots, and some people are just, trolls in there.
yeah, I'm already an X snob. I'm like, who's that? On a checkbox?
That's funny.
No, but not for real. But anyway, the benefits of X, I keep talking about them. You can put your whole podcast up there, all this cool stuff, but there's just so much more. Our industry is way bigger than these conferences that we go to, so it's important to go to those conferences. Like, you have to, as a tech vendor, and if you want to be exposed to the best technology, like the tip of the spear, you got to be going to a handful of conferences every year. So I think it's a great. It was conference week for you, not for me, but
I wish I had you out there. Yeah,
And if we have to end on this, you're very relaxed up on that stage. Like, I'm the kind of guy, I'll be like shaking. Are you just chill, or do you do like a breathing technique? I really wanted to ask you this, and here I'm putting you on the spot, but like, are you just not nervous before you go up on a stage, or?
I think there's a little bit. That's a good point. The first time I was on stage and I tried to play it off. You're very nervous the first time that you ever do it, right? But I think there's two things. One of them, it is a breathing technique that I do, but I do the same thing when I work out. You take one long breath and then you take like 2 short bursts of it, and then you like let it out fully. And then you do it, like, repeat it 2 or 3 times. Gets oxygen just to your head. You kind of calm down, relax.
Yeah.
And I think Huberman was one of the ones who like kind of like talked about it initially on his podcast. I use it to like work out and get, blood to the muscles as well if I'm getting tired in the middle of the workout. So it works really well. You kind of get relaxed, but you're still, you're not like sleepy or anything. And then the other thing is, I had someone when I was on camera one time ask me if I was on, a friend texted me after saying, are you taking beta blockers? And I'm like, you don't need to do that to calm down. Realistically, it's just, throughout the whole thing, it's like, I just get an experience for it. And you're like, how to start handling it. This being one of the forms for it as well. Like right now, like we can be, hey, so many people listening to us, what are we going to say? We're going to feel nervous, whatever, to get into our own heads. But one thing you said to me, and this was at Edge last year, was when you're up on stage, and that was one of the first times I was getting up on stage, everyone's here to listen to you. And this is your dream. And
right.
the skit from Dave Chappelle, right? That
100%, the end of the Chappelle skit, yeah.
Exactly. So
yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And I think when you get that into your head and you think of it that way, and you do look at faces out there who are sitting and listening to you, you get this kind of energy that it becomes a much more comfortable thing to do, and you don't kind of overthink about it. So I think that's one of the things that I knew I had to work on, as I'm going to be more on stage at conferences, at events, talking to even clients and things like that and their teams. It's something I wanted to work on. It's just you have to find the right time to do it. And, now is, I guess, hours for ARCA, since it's popping up more and more. So I'm glad that.
You look way chill up there. I'm like, how you chill? Like, I'll do my heart will start pumping if I'm in a conference room or something. I know it's my start. I'm like, oh man, I got like 50 things I want to say, and I only am allowed to say one thing. And my heart's always pounding. And even before our podcast, I'm like, I got nothing to say. Believe it or not, that's what I was thinking before this podcast. I'm like, dude, I don't have anything to say. And like, we're out of time. But when you talk about like breathing, has been a big one for me. I do like 4 seconds in, I hold it for 7 seconds, 8-second exhale. I do as many of those as I can. I usually get to like 3 or 4 if I'm bugging. And that'll relax me. But something that you made me think of something, like when we talk about getting up on stage or pushing the boundaries of wealth management or whatever it is that you want to do in life, man. You've got to get out of your own way. Like
100%.
what you're trying to convince like you're in your way. So there's like all these things. The reason we started doing this podcast, the reason we weren't doing it is because like I was in my own way, and you and I started talking about it, and it's like, we got to get this done, or I need to start doing videos. It's like, well, you just got to get out of your own way and start doing it. Like, there's nobody stopping you from doing anything except yourself in most cases. So there are people who love you that are going to make sure you don't do stupid things, but
Of course.
But I continue to get out of your own way to expose yourself. You're only here once, man,
That's it.
And I'm not comfortable doing this, but I do it,
Yeah.
So just do it. It doesn't matter.
You got to do it until it gets comfortable. That's what you got to do.
Exactly. So I don't know if I'll ever get comfortable. We'll see.
Who knows?
I'm not here to be comfortable. That's what I said, So I'll always push my comfort zone.
Well, one thing I got to give you, though, and Pete Franco was hitting me up about it, and he hit up the comments. He said, you guys have me on the hook for picking the best tech stack, which you guys got to do the podcast about, because we left him hanging for the last.
Yeah, do we have to do that right now? Because I can knock one out real fast.
No, we're gonna do it. I think on the next podcast, let's focus on the best tech stack. I think I got enough on my side to do too, but you're the expert. You're sitting in front of the clients and the prospects, so.
Now we got 3 tech stacks to build. We got a $50 million firm, a $250 million firm, and a $4 billion firm. So those will be the tech stacks that we'll build, including custodian to the client portal the clients don't use. We'll do the entire tech stack.
I think that would be awesome. I think it'd take an hour doing that, and then what I'll do is just leverage on what I thought resonated really well for the folks at the conference, what we were talking about, this new kind of more enterprise approach we're taking. And I think a lot of it's going to be like, if you're too small, you use the product that we've developed. You're too big, you're going to be able to use modules of our product to own your ecosystem. So let's do that on the next one. I think that would be interesting for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and you know what else we're going to talk about on the next one is what it means to work with headless solutions. Because when we build a tech stack, like, nobody really understands headless, and I think I've got it nailed. So I'll work up some diagrams and share them with you, but we'll get a little bit geeky on the next episode. So
hey, it's our forum to do so, and I think people would love it.
Right. Well, Haik, it's awesome to talk to you, man. It's the end of Friday, so hopefully you can unwind a little bit. You've been out traveling all week, so it's
it'll
a
be
long
good
one.
time to take a break. But thanks
just
again,
finish
George,
your couple hundred of unread emails and
right.
Relax.
Get through some of that, and then I'm done. But thanks so much for the time, George, and I look forward to geeking out on the next one.
It's gonna be a big one. Talk to you soon, man.
See ya.
All right, later.